Nehemiah chapter 9. Nehemiah 9. While you're turning there, our lovely chart. For those of you unfamiliar with it, it contains a lot of information. But we are down here. We've read all of those. We studied all the way down here. And guess what? We have 9 more chapters. And then we'll go into Song of Solomon. And then we'll start over way up there. So you've done well. Nehemiah 7. The wall was rebuilt. And I set up the doors, and the gatekeepers and the singers and the Levites were appointed. Verse 4. Now the city was large and spacious, but the people in it were few, and the houses were not built. Nehemiah had 2 things he had to accomplish at least. Number 1, rebuild the wall, and number 2, repopulate the city. The wall has been rebuilt. Now we're trying to repopulate the city. So, in chapter 8, they all read from the law. Verse 1 of chapter 9, on the 24th day of this month, the sons of Israel assembled with fasting. So we're in the 7th month, the same month they read this law. In sackcloth with dirt upon them, the descendants of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners, and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquity of their fathers. While they stood in their place, they read from the book of the law of the Lord, their God, for a fourth of the day, and another fourth they confessed and worshiped the Lord their God. Now, they go into this long confession. We briefly looked at it last week. We're not even really going to look at it at all this week. They confess, basically, it's a history of Israel. God, you saved us, you did everything good for us, but we keep on messing up, and we keep on messing up, and finally you sent us off, and we are back now, and we're still messing up right now. Chapter 9, verse 32 gets to what they want to request, as it were. Now, therefore, our God, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who keeps covenant and loving kindness, do not let all the hardships seem insignificant before you. So they're saying, right now, our situation we're in right now, we are not autonomous. We are ruled by the Persians. This is not according to your original covenant. It's a hardship for us. Please look down on us that way. Somewhat like they would have cried out to him when they were in Egypt, although it wasn't as bad. Do not let all the hardships seem insignificant before you, which has come upon us, our kings, our princes, our priests, our prophets, our fathers, and all your people, from the days of the kings of Assyria to this day right now. So that whole package deal. We've had it tough, Lord. Verse 36. Now, they will confess more of their sin in between. But verse 36, we are slaves today. And as for the land which you gave our fathers to eat of its fruit and its bounty, behold, we are slaves in it. So we're back in the land, but we still send all of our products east to the king of Persia. Its abundant produce is for the kings, whom you have set over us because of our sins. They also rule over our bodies and our cattle as they please, so we are in great distress. Okay, that's the situation. Now they get to what they're going to do. Because of all this, we are making an agreement in writing, and on the sealed document are the names of our leaders, our Levites, our priests. And then chapter 10, the first 27 verses will be a whole bunch of names. Verse 13 says, the leaders of the people. They had been mentioned in chapter 9, verse 38, but here they're brought out again. And then in verse 28, chapter 10, verse 28, now the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, and all those who had separated themselves from the people of the lands to the law of the God. Okay, so basically what you have here is everybody in the nation is going to make this agreement. In chapter 9, verse 38, we are making an agreement in writing. And then it just lists a whole bunch of people with some general groups. Verse 28. The rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, and all those who had separated themselves from the peoples of the land to the law of God, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, all those who had knowledge and understanding, are joining with their kinsmen, their nobles, and are taking on themselves a curse and an oath to walk in God's law, which was given through Moses, God's servant, and to keep and observe all the commandments of God our Lord, and his ordinances and his statutes. Stop there. This is a covenant to do what they should have already been doing all along. Now, I'm going to make some comments about this covenant, and I need to be careful not to paint too negative a light on this. But there are some things that are negative about this. It's selfish, it's foreseen, and it's sad. How is it selfish? Well, what was it based? When did they make it? We've been in this trouble. We've been in trouble. Now, I realize that they have confessed we're in this trouble because of us. But they keep saying, don't let our hardship be insignificant before you, God. Because of all this hardship that we're enduring, at least that much, if not more, because of this hardship, we're going to make an agreement to follow you. Things do not go well for us when we do not obey you. So, to make things better for us, we will obey you. Do you remember the psalmist in Psalm 51? Actually, before you get there, Matthew chapter 5, I think it's verse 4, says, "Blessed are those who mourn." Does it sound like they're mourning? You could say yes, but...
They had recently. Right? Because they were told to stop.
Stop what?
Mourning.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah. But they're so it is in that. That is the context. But at the same time, part of what they're saying is, it goes poor for us when we don't obey you, so to make it go well for us, we'll obey you, which is somewhat selfish. The psalmist in Psalm 51 says, "Against you and you alone I have sinned." And the first 4 or 5 verses of Psalm 51 are the picture of a man who doesn't really care how it is going for him right now. He realizes that he has hurt God and nothing else matters. I've hurt God. That doesn't exactly seem to be what's going on here. We know there are people that repent only when things are going poorly for them, right? That is a situation. Those who repent, quote unquote, only when things are going poorly for them, which means they repent to make things get better for them, and then they'll serve God. Now, God always promises to his servants that your life will be fine, no problems, no hardship whatsoever, will it? So those who, and there are some, who repent only to get their life better now, and they serve God only so that things will go well now.
It's not long term.
It's not long term. Because if you're going to actually serve God, what are you going to experience? Opposition. And when the opposition comes, well, if you started serving God to make things better now, and serving God causes things to get worse now, what are you going to stop doing? Serving God, right? 2 Timothy 3:12 says that those who live godly lives can expect to be persecuted. Now, I don't want to paint too much negative here, but we understand the backdrop of Nehemiah. How much of all these people who are committing, how much of them actually meant it? It is apparent from their history that not as many of them as said it meant it, right? It is foreseen. Deuteronomy 30. Go ahead and turn there. Deuteronomy 28, 29, and 30, that's the passage where God says, look, you guys are going to sin, and I'm going to send you out of the land. Included in this long prophecy, if you will, Deuteronomy 30, verse 1. So it shall be, when all these things have come upon you, the blessings and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all the nations where the Lord your God has banished you, and you return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and soul, according to all that I command you today, you and your sons, then the Lord your God will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you, which has already happened. Okay, they've already been returned here. Verse 4, if your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. The Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. Are they back in the land? Yep. So, Nehemiah 9 and 10 is, Lord, when we sin, you punish us. And because of the punishment, here we are repenting. We're back in the land where we're repenting. God had already said that would happen some 1,000 years beforehand. What does this say about God? Say it again.
He's all knowing.
He knows. He knows you better than you know yourself. He knew you would go out, and he knew what would work to get you to come back to him. And he knew once you were back in the land what you would do while you're back in the land. So, this emphasizes how well God knows us and how well his plans work. 1,000 years beforehand, he wrote about this. And then they went through the plan, and here they are coming out the other side. So, when God's word says something to you, just trust it. That's all there is to it. It's sad, back here in Deuteronomy 30, verse 11, I'm sorry if you turned out of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 30, verse 11 says, this commandment which I command you today. So he says this 1,000 years beforehand, when everything's wonderful. They come out from the land, they're ready to go into, they've come out from Egypt, they're ready to go into the land. This commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. It's right there. You can reach out and grab it anytime you want to. The New Testament says that his commandments are not. Same thing. Same idea. Look, you can do this. It's when you're not doing it, it's not because you are unable to do it. And that's what makes this so sad. They could have avoided. In Nehemiah 9 and 10, Lord, our burdens are horrible. Well, you could have avoided the whole thing. And it wouldn't have been difficult for you to avoid the whole thing. How sad it is. And how sad it is, two things out here, that it took all that pain to get Israel to commit to serving God. Okay, you go through the pain, and here we come through it, and now you're committing to serve me? Why didn't you just commit to serve me before you went through the pain? Because you could have. The only difference is now that you've gone through 1,000 years of pain, essentially. George.
I've been wondering when I had read this before if you weren't going to take this approach. The thought that had come to my mind, two different verses that I did not go through and reference exactly, but the one about when the servant does as he is told.
Yeah.
So what? Not so what, but so what. And then he demands obedience rather than sacrifice.
Yeah.
And when I was reading this, the impression I was coming away with was that they're trying to portray their obedience as sacrifice. You know,
yeah.
Look at this thing we're doing. Hey, well, look at us. Look at our commitment. No, I mean, you're just back to the blank sheet, the level playing field, whatever you want to call it, square one here.
Right.
You've not earned brownie points by what you're accomplishing. You're just trying to catch up.
Yeah.
And they don't appear to have that perspective.
Right.
Certainly.
In Genesis, you remember when Jacob, when he leaves the land, he's sent away. He has a dream. Genesis 28, verse 10. Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran. He's he's running away from his brother is what he's doing. He came to a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set, and he took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. And behold, a ladder was set on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the land in which you lie. I will give it to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his dream and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob arose early in the morning and took the stone which he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on it. He called the name of the place Bethel. However, previously the name of the city had been Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me, and if I might suggest you read this as since, or because God will be with me. Not, oh, if God, you'll be with me. I'm going to put some conditions on you, God. God, if you're going to be with me, then I'll be your servant. That's not what's going on. If God had just said, I'm going to be with you, you stick with me, and everything will be fine. Jacob says, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety. In other words, if things are going to go well serving the Lord, then what do you think I should do? This is called a no-brainer, right? Then the Lord will be my God. So here he is, he's setting off on his journey. And God says, I'm going to give all this good to you. All you got to do is stay with me. And he says, okay, done deal. This is a no-brainer. If it's going to go well for me, then I'll serve the Lord. And here these people come out the other end of it when they've gone through all the chaos and all the trouble, and they say, okay, when it doesn't go well for us, when we don't obey you, it doesn't go well for us, so we'll obey you now. You know any Christians that fit in both of those categories? I don't want to be in the bad category, right? I want to be in the category that says, no, when things are going well, I'll recommit to serving him because things are going well, right? Not have to go all the way through the chaos and fall down on my face like the prodigal son and then make the decision to commit to him. Comments or questions on this?
There's something like 1,500 years from the thing with Jacob, whatever
Yeah.
it is, and it, the history there of the failure and not learning from it, or learning from it for a little while and not learning from it.
Or some of them learning from it,
Yeah,
most
right.
of them not.
But we're 2,500 years away from Nehemiah, roughly,
Yeah.
right? Something like that. And so we've got all those things happen to them as an example.
Yeah,
So have we learned from the example?
right.
We better.
Right.
We are no better
Right.
than them, certainly. But
And we have more privilege than they do.
yeah,
Hebrews 11 and 12. Yeah. So all the more I have to look in this mirror and seriously consider, I hope I'm not being as hard-hearted and stubborn as they are. I better not be.
I cannot think of where it is, but it say like that the people were not to accumulate, beware when they accumulate wealth, or don't accumulate wealth, so that when
Deuteronomy 8 probably.
Yeah.
Because when you go into the land, it'll cause you to forsake the Lord.
yeah, because when you get all this, when everything's going well for you, what are we as humans sometimes they're tempted to do? Forget about it, because like they would say, I brought this, I did this. This is because this is things that I have done that have brought the wealth on me.
I have one other comment. But
Oh, sorry.
you look at the scripture, it seems like there's not many times that men are the initiators of a covenant with God.
Yeah.
I kind of think of just escapes me just now, but throwing out the fleece.
Gideon?
Gideon, putting out the fleece. If
Yeah.
help me understand.
Right.
Help me understand. Making sure I'm reading this right, but I'll throw this out. You act this way, I'll understand. And then he doubles down on it, which is kind of amazing anyway. But in looking at this, they're not so much initiating a new covenant with God, as it seems like. It kind of parallels more like the Mayflower Compact for me. It's like, we're coming to this new land, let's have an agreement amongst ourselves that these are the rules we're going to follow so that we can build a society here. And this seems closer to that to me, because the agreement seems to be among themselves. Look,
Yeah.
if we're going to live here and we're going to live in peace and prosper, we're going to have to do this. And so let's agree that we're going to do this. They're not really changing anything God has said.
No, they're saying we're going to do what
acknowledging
God
we're
has
going to
said.
do it.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of a duh moment too, isn't it? Like, yeah, of course you're going to say that. I mean, you should say that. Not of course you're going to say that. Oh, of course you're going to, because of, no. Yeah, of course, duh. Who wouldn't say that, right? Yeah, let's reserve. Who in here is going to commit to recommit to serving the Lord? I will. Yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? Which emphasizes how much patience God has with everybody, right? Because here they are, 1,000 years later, saying what they should have been saying all along. And yet God has been patient with them. Again, I don't want to paint too negative a picture here, because they are saying, okay, let's do it. Let's pick up this challenge that's been laid down, and let's serve the Lord. Okay. Comment or question again?
One other thing, Lee.
Yep.
Nehemiah signs it.
Yeah.
And to whatever extent there is anything to be learned here of a less flattering approach, he signed it. And if there's anybody who would have understood if their attitudes or understandings were not 100% what they ought to be, he would have known.
Yeah.
And he signed it. And I mean, he's been working with them for as long as he's had an opportunity. He's been working with them, and I don't know. I just kind of wonder for it all if maybe there's an extent to which you stick to your guns and acknowledge these things, and there's an extent to which, you know what, it's a little bit of a silly thing. Your approach might not be great, but it's not wrong, and for the sake of encouragement and growth,
Yeah.
we're going to work with it.
He might have been leading this, in which case then the spin that I have emphasized in this discussion is inadequate, right? I find it interesting, the word Nehemiah, the governor, that word is a Persian word. And the point would be, that's a visible reminder that they are not autonomous. Because it's a Persian word for governor. In other words, even the titles that they're calling themselves reflect that they're not autonomous anymore. Just like later on when we'll have the tetrarchs and all these. Okay, so in verse 30, so chapter 10, verse 30, we get specific. So in verse 29, we'll obey God. And then they'll name some specifics. Some more things about this covenant. It is personal and it is private at the same time, which is really saying the same thing. We will not give our daughters to the peoples of the land or take their daughters for our sons. This is done on the individual level. This isn't, the whole group signs up for this, but this is not something the whole group does. No, that family does or does not. That family does or does not. Also, it is communal, as in here's the whole group, and ceremonial. Verse 31, as for the peoples of the land who bring the wares or any grain on the Sabbath day, so now we're not talking necessarily about individual people anymore, although it'll apply individually. We're talking about the laws of the nation as a nation. As for the peoples of the land who bring wares or any grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or a holy day. And this again has to do with the ceremonies. Verse 31, the rest of it says, and we will forego the crops of the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. This has to do with how you treat one another, right? I know it's in the law, but this has to do with morals. Hey, my brother's in need. I'll just give it to him instead of charging interest and demanding repayment of the debt. So we have it's moral and it's meaningful. Who in here, if I came up to you and said, I'd like to borrow $5,000, that's a good chunk, although it's not a magnificent chunk, but realistically, I might have to borrow $5,000 to pay for that ambulance ride. I don't. But that ambulance ride will cost $3,800. Can I borrow that? Okay, now John gives it to me. And then he's hit with this, and you're not getting it back either. I mean, that costs. That's a sacrifice. That's a true sacrifice. How about we will not give our daughters to the peoples of the land or take their daughters for our sons? But I'm in love with that person. I have these emotions. I care for that person. Would that be costly? Would that be a sacrifice to say, but okay, I do. I recognize I have this attachment, but I'm not going to follow through. I refuse to allow myself. This is not something, oh yeah, we're just going to do it. This is not something that's not going to cost them anything. Right. It will cost them.
It is easier
Said.
to make. Well, it's easier to make that decision early on than it is later on. You have to.
For the present and forward looking.
Yeah.
Nice. We're reading from the same book. Yeah, it's easier, and some of these are for the present. Like, I'm not going to give right now. I'm not going to give my wife away, or I'm not going to give my wife away at all. I'm not going to give my daughter away. I'm not going to give my son away. I will not do this right now. I want to, but I'm not going to right now. And then in verse 32, we placed ourselves under obligation to contribute yearly 1/3 of a shekel. So they're looking ahead. So this is a commitment that it makes preparation for long-term commitment. Let me repeat that. And if I'm not saying it clearly enough, make it up in your own mind what I am trying to say. Preparation now for long-term commitment. I commit now. And I'm going to actually take action right now so that for 1 year from now, I will be prepared to serve the Lord in whatever He's said. And then every day, I guess they would, I don't know what 1/365th of 1/3 of a shekel is, but it's not much. By the way, it's doable and it's dutiful. It's doable. 1/3 of a shekel is not much. Okay, it's something that probably a lot of people very easily could have afforded. It's not one of these, one of these big numbers that's like a talent. Okay, what's a talent? No, the shekel is pretty small. 1/3 of a shekel is really small. 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our God. Okay, yeah, I can do this. You can do it all because God said to, right? Remember, His commandments are not burdensome, old or new. And yet it's dutiful, as in, George was saying this a minute ago, I think. They're not saying anything new. All they're doing is committing to what God had already told them to do years ago. Now, when we make a commitment to the Lord, when we enter, Rhonda and I were writing this morning with each other, God has made an agreement with all of mankind already. So we're in the contract when we're born. We might not agree with it or like it, but we're in the contract when we're born. And then we submit to Him and we say, yeah, I submit to you. I recognize that you're the Lord and I submit to you, right? And when we do that, when we submit to Him, this is the kind of thing that we're doing. It's personal. Yep, I'm not going to think those evil thoughts anymore. It's private. Same thing, really, as opposed to communal. Yeah, and then I'm going to join a group. Because God says, Lee, a group is good for you. You need to do this, right? It's ceremonial. Look, there's going to be some moral obligations I have, and then there are going to be some ceremonial obligations I have, right? It's moral, it's meaningful. It's going to cost me some, I'm going to want to do some things. And the Lord's going to say to me, either that's a sin, don't do it, or that's not best, don't do it. And it's this, the one that's not a sin, by now I'm pretty okay with that, right? Okay, no, I don't want to sin. But here's the category of things that are lawful, but some things aren't profitable, right? But if it's going to be meaningful, I'm going to say, hey, look, anything is worth being like God and being with Him in heaven. Right now, I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to make changes right now that are going to look toward the future, so that a year from now, I am more faithful, more strong than I am now. Doable, and I'm just agreeing to the Word. So, the principles are the same. Comments or questions? Was giving up, say there's a son or a daughter who's in love. Say you're the son or the daughter in love with the other person. He's right there. I will not marry him. Is that easy? But God had said in Deuteronomy 30, it's not too difficult for you.
With God's help.
First of all, God didn't say it'll all be easy, right? And secondly, it won't be too difficult, and it depends on your perspective, right? If you've got to choose between, in this case, that girl or God, when you've already chosen God, then it'll make deciding about this other thing that you want so much easier. No, I don't actually want that. It's all about perspective, right? Okay. So in verse 32, we place ourselves under obligation to contribute yearly 1/3 of a shekel. And through the end of this chapter, it's about the house of God. If you look in the end, the very last sentence of chapter 10, thus we will not neglect the house of our God. So there are some things that were private and moral and some things that are more ceremonial. Okay, so they recommit. If you're going to live in the city of God, you've got to act like children that are living in the city of God. Chapter 11, verse 1. Remember, they're still trying to populate this city. Now, the leaders of the people lived in Jerusalem. But the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while 9/10 remained in the other cities. The people blessed all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. Stop here. For how long had they been trying to populate the city? Roughly 100 years. Somewhere around 100, it was 539 when they were sent back, or 536, and now it's somewhere around 44. I don't know exactly where around, but so we're talking somewhere around more than 90, what's that, 92 years? More than 92 years, when God had said in Isaiah 44, Cyrus will say, go back and build the city. So here we are. It's been 100 years, and people still aren't living in it. And where is it? The holy city. Remember Deuteronomy 12. God said, I'm going to point out a place on this earth where my name will be. Now, if you care about the Lord, and He says, my name will be there, what are you going to do?
Be there.
You're going to be there. That's it. You're going to be there. That's interesting. What does the Lord say about Sundays? He says, be there, doesn't He? So we better be there. In fact, getting people into this city is like pulling teeth. They had to choose lots to get people in there. You know what the shortest straw is? The people who are, this is crazy. It's God's city. It's where His Messiah is going to come to someday. And you would think people would be flocking to get there, but they're not. Now that kind of reminds me of the situation today. You go out and you say, hey, you can come to Mount Zion right now. Look at all God has to give to you. And you go up and they initially say, oh yes, I'm very interested. And then you say, well, you're ready to commit to it? And then they have 1,000 excuses. Why not? It's like pulling teeth to get people in there. And then there are unfaithful Christians who are unfaithful, and you say, hey, you got to be faithful again. And it's like pulling teeth. This is not new, is really the point. It's not new. Some don't care. Some don't want to care. Some do want to care. Remember, they're still here. They're still coming. And if there's something inside of them that if you ask them, you say, hey, do you want to care more? They would say, yes, I want to care more. I want to care more. So when they take that little step, and you see it, and you see that little tiny, tiny step in the right direction, what do you do for them? And the people blessed all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. Whatever that means, I'm going to say you encourage them. Hey, good little step. It was just a little step, yes, but it's a little step in the right direction. And 1,000 more of those, and you'll become a spiritual giant.
Is there a question?
Yeah.
I just noticed this. Obviously, they cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to live in Jerusalem. And then in verse 2, at least in my translation, it says the people blessed all the men who willingly offered to live in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Is that saying the people that were that were chosen the short straw, or was it saying that other people willingly chose?
Interesting. I don't know. I was interpreting it as, I'm sure there are some who are willing, because there are some already there, right? There are some who are willing. Nehemiah's there. Other people are there. In the context, I took those, I said the shortest straw. Again, I painted a negative picture there. And then in verse 2, I would suggest, says that they volunteered. You put the two together and you have voluntold.
You got to be a little bit willing to even draw straws.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to paint too negative a picture, but when it should be people gushing to get to the holy city, it's hard not to paint, hard not to read it. Although, yes, so when these people step up and they say, okay, I'll volunteer to be put in the lottery, as it were. I'll volunteer to be put in, okay, good for you, right? Okay.
They're fighting to live there now.
Say it again?
They're fighting to live there now.
Exactly. Right.
That's actually an interesting observation.
Yeah.
You know.
When they no longer should be.
Right.
They're all. So if they can be all backwards, who else can be all backwards? Me. So I need to be very careful. And George admitted he could be too. Or were you saying that I could be? Somebody else over here? Okay. Chapter 11 is a whole bunch of names of a whole bunch of people. I'm not going to get into chapter 11 very much at all, other than to look at verse 14, for example. In chapter 11, verse 14, there's a whole list of people who are going to the city. And in 14 it says, their brothers, valiant, if you're reading out of the New American Standard, it will say, valiant warriors. 128. So there are brothers, 128 brothers, who are, according to the New American Standard, valiant warriors. The New King James and the King James and the ESV all use the term mighty men of valor. The NIV says men of standing. The Net Bible says exceptional men. That word is translated able in the same chapter, verse 6. The sons of Perez who lived in Jerusalem were 468 able men. And in 1 Chronicles chapter 9, which is mostly parallel to, or the same content as Nehemiah 11, the same word in the same verse is translated able men. In fact, 1 Chronicles chapter 9. Let's go ahead and turn there. Verse 13. 1 Chronicles 9:13. Their relatives heads of their fathers' households. 1,760. Now the numbers are different, but the context is apparently supposed to be the same. I haven't worked all that out yet. Very able men for the work of the service of the house of God. In Nehemiah 11, it's talking about Levites. I don't know if they're valiant warriors also, or just very able men. The word carries with it the idea of faculty, like able to think, strength, efficiency, and competence. That describes these people. Now they're Levites, and 1 Chronicles chapter 9 paints this picture of when it came to serving the house of the Lord, these men got it done. They were Johnny on the spot. When something had to be done, they were there. They knew how to do it. They knew how to do it right. They knew how to do it for a long time. In other words, when God wanted some work done, they were ready to go. Now, I think it's unfortunate that the 128 names weren't listed there, because I'd like to know those people. Or better yet, I would like to, if I had lived back then and were a Levite, I'd like to be included in that list. Yes, there's one who takes the job responsibly, seriously, and is able. In the New Testament, I'm reminded of elders, especially those who are holding fast and able to refute sound doctrine. That's more like a Titus chapter 1. Refute false doctrine. Thank you. Right? That's why I don't even bother to should Titus chapter 1. Right. You will be able to both exhort in sound doctrine and refute those who contradict. Right? There's a valiant warrior. And by the way, it doesn't only have to be a man, but to be an elder, it has to be a man, right? But women can refute sound those who contradict. Right? We have these valiant warriors. I think of Timothy and all the work he did going out. Paul and the apostles who almost lost their lives time and again, and finally some of them did because of the work that they were doing. Verse 17 talks about somebody who was the leader in beginning the thanksgiving at prayer. I just love the way that's worded. The leader in beginning the thanksgiving at prayer. Okay, it's time for us to pray, and in this case, at least in the beginning, by giving thanksgiving, and this man is the leader. That's what he does. That's what he's known for. We have song leaders. Hey, by the way, I'm interested in this. Ezra was he was an exceptional man. Ezra was a man of standing, wasn't he? In fact, people knew who Ezra was, didn't he? People also knew who this Mattanai guy was, because he's the leader in the beginning of Thanksgiving at the prayer. I wonder if there's a little competition right there. I was at a song singing at Cason Lane, 2004. Were we married? When did we marry? 2005. I don't know when it was, but it was around then. And Rick told me, you need to go to this singing over here. That's not really true, but I went with Matt and you. Just Matt. So we weren't married. So we go there. There's this singing. There's 130 people there or something like that. And I heard one of the song leaders say, just watch what I do. And what was he going to sing? You know what it is. It's something like, blessed be the tie that binds. And he said, by the time I'm done singing, I'll have them all in tears. Here's something that I was sent this morning by my mother-in-law. We should be lifting each other up and cheering each other on, not trying to outshine one another. The sky would be awfully dark with just one star. I think that's perfect. That applies in so many aspects. That's this life. That's brothers and sisters living together, isn't it? And I'm not suggesting at all that there was some kind of competition in these people here. I'm not. But there is sometimes competition, and there ought never be, right? Because we're all trying to encourage one another to serve God. I'm not trying to outdo John and encouraging everybody to serve God. John better not be trying to outdo me or any of us together, right? We're all here. It's our time to take this very soberly, very seriously. It's my time to try to bring us together, all of us together, to praise God and worship Him.
Somebody who has the mindset of the person we were talking about a minute ago, they have the priorities mixed up.
Yeah.
That's not their point of singing and being together is to encourage, like you said, to encourage one another, not to show how good of a song leader I am.
Right. Right. Or this guy, hey, I'm the leader in the beginning of the Thanksgiving at prayer. But you've heard it, and you've seen the attitude. No, that's my job. As opposed to everybody seems to be mature, and they're so mature that they can write down about that man. This man was known for this. He did this well. He did it so well, this man or this woman, but here it's a man. He did it so well that we came to rely on him. That's his job. And what a great job brother, what's his name, did. And nobody said, oh, he's just trying to steal the show. He's always the one that does it. Leader in the beginning of the Thanksgiving at prayer. Leader. So there are some who are very willing and very ready to lead us, to lead the congregation. And that's great. We need that. We need people who are, I'm ready to stand up and lead. In fact, Rick was telling me about a congregation where he was not too long ago that had, I think he said, 14 men who were ready to preach. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. I wonder if all 14 of them were also ready to lead the congregation when it came to come to withdraw from somebody. Because you see, that's not the same thing, you know. John once told me that preparing a lesson for him is like me preparing taxes. He doesn't like, he used to not like it, this is 10 years ago, he didn't like preparing the sermon outline. And I don't like preparing taxes. He does like preparing taxes. It might not show, but I like to prepare outlines. They might not be any good, but I like the system of it, right? So it's easy to get up here and for everybody to come up and say, oh man, you did, that was a really wonderful sermon. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I'm ready to lead when it comes to getting a pat on the back. But how about these other jobs? The ones that people don't know so much about. They don't see it. It's not so visible. Am I also Johnny on the spot when it comes to that? Or the ones that are difficult, like, hey, here's a brother or a sister that hasn't been doing what they ought to do. I'm not sure it would be great to have a reputation being the leader and always, but if that's what it takes, if it's the godly work that's being done, then I want that reputation, right? I'm reminded of Romans chapter 13. Verse 6, since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, so this is Romans, I said 13, I meant 12.
Well,
Yeah,
just saying.
12:6. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith. If service, in his serving. Or he who teaches in his teaching. Or he who exhorts in his exhortation. He who gives with liberality. Or he who leads with diligence. Or he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. I want all of us have something that we're ready to be first at. Yeah, we need to be growing in everything. But then there's going to be one thing. Yep, I naturally can lead, can be first in line to do this. And if we do it well and in faith, then in God's book, our names will be written as the leader in the beginning of the Thanksgiving at prayer. Verse 23 says, this is how they had set up the singers. That's verse 22. Verse 23. For there was a commandment from the king concerning them, and a firm regulation for the song leaders day by day. And then several times it'll say, like in chapter 12, verse 36, that they sang with musical instruments of David, the man of God. And then in chapter 12, verse 45, in accordance with the command of David and his son Solomon. So everything that they're doing, although it only says it once or twice.
That says in 24 as well.
Where?
12, 24.
Yeah, did I miss one? Right, as prescribed by David, the man of God. Right, so over and over you see that whatever they were doing, they've got to go live in the city. And they've got to get the city up and running. And there's only one way to get that city up and running. And that's to do exactly what God said. And so here they are, with Nehemiah leading the charge, and some other good men, and lots of good women in there too, leading and doing things exactly the way the Lord wanted them to. That's my last comment for tonight. Ethan.
Well, God's system works.
Yes. So if you didn't hear it, he said, what do you know? God's system works. It's about as simple as we could state it. And accurate, too. Is there another song? There is no other song, then. Gary, will you lead us in prayer, please?